Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. We have another great show for you today. We'll see who Jerry West has had some recent praise for. We'll check in with Jokic, who had himself a career night before seeing how the Bucks finally lost a game. Then we'll check in with the Jazz, who extend their win streak, but through some controversy, so we'll discuss that. We'll talk trade rumors and done deals surrounding the Lakers right now before doing a small injury update and ending the show with some predictions on some matchups happening in the next couple days. So without further ado, let's get started. Like I said, Jerry West has had some recent praise for somebody, and if you don't know why that's a big deal, let me give you a little recap of who Jerry West is. Jerry West is the logo of the NBA, in case you didn't know. He's a legend. He was a consultant for the Clippers right now. He's a former executive for the Lakers, and during that time helped them, on the road to a couple of dynasties. And then he was also a consultant for the Warriors during their dynasty and their championship run as well, before calling it quits and then heading to the Clippers, where he was, a part of getting Kawhi and Paul George. So he definitely knows his basketball, definitely knows his way around the association, and definitely recognizes talent when he sees it. He's an NBA Hall of Famer, so it's safe to say he knows what he's talking about when it comes to basketball. And, he's proven he knows talent extremely well. So getting praise from him is a serious honor, and it doesn't come that often either. He's not a guy that just throws out willy-nilly like who he enjoys watching playing the game. There's only certain times where he sticks up for a few people, and the latest person is, European sensation Luka Doncic, who has had a breakout year. Even though he was Rookie of the Year last year, he's putting up numbers that no one would have expected for just his sophomore season, especially if he's 20 years old. He's a MVP caliber player already, the only person close to Giannis's numbers, the only person that's really competing with him right now, even though there are big names in Anthony Davis, LeBron James, James Harden. I really think that this race is a two-legged race between Giannis and Luka. So, Jerry West has recognized this as well, and he said, quote, "Everyone wishes they had a 20-year-old who plays like him, and he hasn't even scratched the surface. It's fun to watch genius. I've been around a long time, and I've seen a lot of special players. How many superstars are there in the league at any given time? Maybe 5 or 6. There's a difference between all-stars and superstars. A superstar is different, and that's what he is." So it's obvious that Luka Doncic is a superstar in this league because of what he's done, not only in his rookie season, but how he's following it up this year, and at such a young age as well. And on a Dallas Mavericks team where he doesn't have a lot of pieces to be helping him out. Porzingis is still coming back from an injury. He's actually injured right now, so a lot of the pressure gets put on Doncic to lead this team, and he's been making them competitive this year. They're only 1 point out, or 1 game behind second place in the West right now. And he's a big reason why. He's someone that can carry the team. He has just so much skill to him. He's not that athletic, but he has so much skill. His ball handling, his passing ability, his vision, his craftiness. He's very creative with how he plays. And on top of that, he's got unlimited range and can finish around the bucket as well. So it's tough to stop him, and he's one of the best players in the NBA right now. And he's only 20 years old, like I would like to mention again. He has the most points per game than any other 20-year-old, and he has 29.4 points per game compared to players like LeBron James when he was 20. He had 27.2. KD had 25.3, and Shaq had 23.4. So he's above all of these high-caliber players. LeBron James, hailed as the GOAT. KD, one of the greatest scorers of all time. And then Shaq, one of the most dominant players of all time. So for him to be in that kind of company just shows his greatness. And at such a young age, the ceiling is so high for this player. And then Jerry West went on to say even more. He says, quote, "Look at Dallas. One player has transformed them into a playoff team. He will be the best player Dallas has ever had. I have great respect for Nowitzki, but Dirk is not him." I think that definitely stretches it a little bit. Obviously, Doncic is a fantastic player, but Dirk is a legend in his own right. I mean, he basically invented the fadeaway shot with one knee up in the air. That was his bread and butter. That's how he scored most of his points in mid-range. And it was unstoppable, too, because of his length, because of his height. It was so difficult to try and block that shot, and it's a shot that Kevin Durant himself has taken upon mastering and bringing into his craft as well. So and not to mention that Dirk Nowitzki led the Dallas Mavericks to an NBA championship already. Dirk's career stats, he's 6th on the all-time scoring list with 31,560. He won a championship in 2010, 2011 against a Miami Heat team basically by himself. He carried the Dallas Mavericks to that championship, and rightfully so. He got the Finals MVP. He's a 14-time All-Star, and he was 12-time All-NBA. He is one of the greatest players to have ever played, definitely probably the best foreign player to have ever played in the NBA. And, he also spent the most time at one franchise, than any other player in history, 21 straight years at Dallas Mavericks. And so not only is he a great superstar, but he's a loyal superstar as well. Even when it became rough, he stuck around, helped the young guys, and even late in his career, he found a way to get them a championship. So Jerry West thinking that Doncic could be one of the best players of all time after, seeing all the players he's seen, not only in his playing years, because he was a player back in the day and during a time where so many greats had been playing the game, but also as an executive and as a consultant is definitely saying something. And Luka Doncic, he continues to prove why he's such a great player and why Jerry West is talking so highly of him. He followed up that praise with a great game against the Chicago Bulls recently. It's no question that teams target him because he's their main guy. He's, if their offense doesn't run through him, their offense doesn't run. And so they try to make him uncomfortable, when they play him. And it's interesting because Rick Carlisle actually recently complained about this, how they're basically beating up Luka Doncic. They're being extremely physical, and referees are kind of letting this go. Little bumps and bruises here and off the ball. Every time he's going to the basket, he's getting slammed. So Rick Carlisle really wants, the refs to kind of look at this and protect, his star player, the future of their franchise. And Luka kind of commented on this too, saying, it's true, but at the end of the day, he's just got to play and do what he can. So he's got the right mentality, still works hard. But that's exactly what he does. And he did that against the Bulls as well. Luka had 38 points, 11 rebounds, and 10 assists in a 118-110 victory. So that's another casual triple-double for him. And now he has more 30-point triple-doubles this season than the rest of the NBA combined. And that's with players around the league like LeBron, Anthony Davis, Giannis, and even Harden. LeBron is the closest one with 3. And, all of these players are capable of doing that and are honestly more suitable to do that because LeBron, obviously his size, he can score whenever he wants. He's, an assist machine now that he's a point forward. So he should be getting triple-doubles all the time. It should be pretty easy for him to put in 30, but that's not necessarily his role this year. So maybe he's deflecting a little bit. Anthony Davis has been a monster this year. He can get a board whenever he wants to just by standing underneath the basket. And he's been scoring at will as well, especially in recent weeks. And then Giannis, he's the front runner for the MVP. So you would expect him to be getting close to triple-doubles, but he does have the most double-doubles in the league. So that makes sense. Probably just doesn't have his assist numbers up. So Luka is among great company, and he's outdoing them as well. And the fact that he's just 20 years old is insane. It just goes to show that, there's no way that this is his prime. That means that he's going to get even better. So if he's doing this early in his career before he even really, really establishes himself and puts himself in his prime, it's kind of scary to think about where he's going to be in a couple of years. He has 19 triple-doubles in his entire career. And the next one on the list before turning 21 is Magic Johnson, who had 7, LeBron James, who had 5. He's killing them on this stat. And that's before turning 21. So he still has time to even further this total. But he has 19, where Magic Johnson is next up with 7. Magic Johnson, one of the best players in NBA history, one of the best point guards. The type of, play pattern that Magic Johnson has is very synonymous with, the way that Luka Doncic plays. Very crafty, finds ways to get his teammates involved. And then LeBron James, obviously, it can't say much more about him. And the Mavs are 2 games out of second place right now, where they once were. They did take a dip in recent games. They're 5-5 in their last 10, but this is a step in the right direction. They had a couple issues because Porzingis has missed a few games. Luka missed a few games with that ankle injury, but now that Luka's back, pretty healthy, Luka is leading them. And they did this without Porzingis, who has been sidelined with a knee injury. Not entirely sure when he's going to return. There's no set date yet, but he didn't get that much help from his teammates. Dwight Powell added 16 points and 7 rebounds, which is pretty good for Dwight Powell. He definitely could be a high-impact guy, especially off the bench. Tim Hardaway Jr., who probably is overlooked a little bit on this Mavericks team, he could be a great piece. I always thought he was really good at the Knicks, so I'm glad he kind of got out of that situation. He put up 15 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists on 5 of 8 shooting, and 3 for 4 from three-point land. So he was extremely efficient. He probably could have shot the ball a little more too. And then Justin Jackson and Finney Smith each had 11 points. So, pretty solid contribution throughout the squad, but mostly it's coming from Luka, and he's doing most of the heavy lifting. And I mean, it's not that the Bulls have been any good. They've lost 4 straight, and they're 4-6 in their last 10. But it's an important feature to win your games against teams that are under 500, and they did just that. So for Luka to get a triple double in this game just furthers the conversation that he can lead a team to the playoffs. And another player that's on the same mission had a career night as well. We're talking Jokic and the Nuggets coming up.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how Jerry West had some high praise for Luka Doncic, who's only 20 years old and already dominating the NBA. He's probably second in this MVP race right now, just behind Giannis, but he's been balling and he's been playing extremely well. So to get high praise from a player like Jerry West, or a person like Jerry West now that he's not a player, is definitely, something that he should be very proud of. He doesn't really ever look at stats or praise or the noise or the media, anything like that. He kind of just does his thing. But I know that this definitely meant something to him. Another player that, that's been playing pretty well as of late had a career night. Jokic for the Nuggets. The Nuggets have kind of been a topic of discussion as of late. They've been playing really well. They're second in the West with players coming back from injury and players having career nights such as Michael Porter Jr. the other night, who had 25 points. He's finally feeling himself again after that injury that he had for so long, and now he's, starting to contribute a little more. They got Murray back, who has been nursing a couple injuries, just minor injuries, nothing too serious. So that's definitely a big piece for them. And then Barton as well, which proved to be very important in their recent game because he had a great game in this one. But, having these pieces back during a win streak and the way that they've been playing recently is just going to help the momentum even more. Now, Jokic was up for a career night against the Atlanta Hawks. The Nuggets haven't had the toughest schedule. I mean, when you think of the Atlanta Hawks, you think, of course, the Nuggets are going to roll over them, but that's not necessarily the point. As of late, the Atlanta Hawks obviously aren't that great. Trae Young is pretty much the only one that's really been making any noise over there, consistently at least. He's kind of their centerpiece and, top of the All-Star list for Eastern Conference guards too. So that just speaks to his greatness as a player. The Nuggets did actually lose to the Wizards pretty recently. For whatever reason, they've been winning a lot of games against big teams in the last 5 games. They've beaten the Heat, who are a force in the East. I think they're third right now, if I'm not mistaken. They've been playing extremely well, led by Jimmy Butler. Dragic is starting to add in some more points as well, and Adebayo is really starting to blossom as a star in this league. Great center. And then the Nuggets, they also beat the Wizards, also beat the Nuggets, who we're talking about now, second in the West. And then the Celtics, who are second in the East. So they get up for big games. The Celtics are another force to be reckoned with, and somehow the Wizards beat them and the Nuggets and the Heat. So the Nuggets typically, though, they do really well in their own rights in terms of playing teams under 500. But the Hawks played the Nuggets pretty well in this game. But Jokic was just too much for them. They couldn't stop him. He dropped 47 points in this game, which is a career high for him. And he also added 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals, and a block. And what's even more impressive about all of this is that he did this all with no turnovers. So he put in 47 points. I think he's definitely capable of doing this more. Not necessarily he's going to do this on a nightly basis, but he can get his points total up for sure because he has so much versatility in his offensive abilities. So he could go down low and bang with the big boys down low, and he could take it out, to the perimeter and shoot from 3. And a fadeaway too. He's got a lot of things in his arsenal that can lead to more points and more production from him. Easy for him to get 8 boards for sure, but the 5 assists, he could bump that up. He's a great passer, great passing center. And, 2 steals and a block. He did it all on defense as well. And then no turnovers. That's definitely the thing that sticks out the most to me. I criticized him a few podcasts ago for getting like 6 turnovers or something like that because I think that he's one of those players that should take care of the ball better. He has, good handles for a big man. Like I said, he's a good passer, so I don't see him turning the ball over that much. So for him to come back with a 47-point effort and no turnovers is definitely a step in the right direction for him. So let's kind of break this game down and just see how this transpired for, the big man. In the first quarter, the Hawks actually jumped out to a lead because for whatever reason, they play really well in the first quarter. But the problem is that they just don't have enough talent to sustain it. Like I said, they kind of only have Trae Young to really facilitate their offense. And, when he goes, they go. But either way, he doesn't have enough pieces around him to beat a team like the Nuggets, who were really versatile and could, get impact from many different players on any different day. The Nuggets, honestly, were only kept in the game in the first quarter by Jokic, who had 18 points all by himself. The next highest scorer only had 6, and then after that, just 2 points. So Jokic really keeping the Nuggets in this game, putting him on his back. But then he started to get some help in the second quarter, and the Nuggets kind of took control of the game and really started playing better as a team. They had 8 assists on 14 made field goals to give them a 64-56 lead at halftime. So when they're moving the ball around really well, they kind of, styled their offense after the Warriors when they were an up-and-coming young team. And so when they're moving the ball around really well, they get open shots and they're going to be more productive. And this is how they took such a big lead going to halftime. But then again, coming out in the third quarter, they came out a little slow again. Very similar to the first in terms of Jokic kind of having to carry most of the load. He had 13 points in this quarter, with the next big contributor having 6. The Hawks outscored them in this quarter, and then kind of continued to cut the deficit and just really kept the game interesting going into the fourth. And so in the fourth, they came within 1 point of the Nuggets, but that's pretty much the closest they would get. the Nuggets finally took control of the game and got the buckets they needed to down the stretch to win this one 123-115. This is definitely, a big game for them, as, they've lost to the Hawks earlier in the year when Trae just completely went off. He had 42 points and 11 assists. So to lose to Atlanta, one of the worst teams in the league, they only have so many wins this season. It's definitely something they don't want to have on their resume. So they made up for it in this contest and did what they should have done the first night and won the game. Denver had dropped 9 of 11 of their last games in Atlanta. So they've had a bad record in Atlanta recently. So they kind of righted the ship on that as well. Will Barton had a great game, even though all the headlines would go to Jokic. He posted 28 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. So he was very impactful. This was his season best for his points. 28 points is a high volume effort, and then almost gets a double-double with the 9 rebounds, just needed one more. Murray, like I said, coming back from nursing an injury, had 16 points, 5 rebounds, and 8 assists. Those 8 assists really stand out to me just because, I think a lot of people probably challenge the fact that he should be more of a facilitator as well as the points he pours in. So this is definitely a good number for him to look for and continue to work on. And then Monte Morris had 14 off the bench. And so that's pretty much the highest contribution that was left from the Nuggets. Millsap and Harris, players that, the Nuggets can typically count on to get some of their offensive load from, only combined for 6 points in this game. So this isn't necessarily a good thing to see from Millsap and Harris, but it also shows just the versatility of the Denver Nuggets in terms of their production and who's giving them the points each and every night. Yes, Jokic had to score 47 points, so he probably had the ball a little more, which kind of gave less for Harris and Millsap to work with. But it just shows that, over time and throughout different games, different players can step up. Even players like Michael Porter Jr. the other day, who put in 25 points in 23 minutes. Or Plumlee coming off the bench, he can have pretty big minutes as well. He's just such an aggressive center, and he can get some easy buckets as well. On the other side, the Hawks actually shot pretty well, but the Nuggets just had so many more field goal attempts. They had 92 field goal attempts compared to the Hawks' 77. Almost all the Hawks starters had double-digit scoring, which was surprising. Kevin Huerter had 22 points and 8 rebounds, which are pretty good numbers for him. He, contributed extremely well. John Collins had 17 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists with 2 blocks. DeAndre Hunter had 16 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. And then Len had 10 points off the bench. He's been playing a lot better recently, and he definitely has a lot of upside to him if he can find his consistency. I always thought he was a really good player, and, it's unfortunate he landed at the Hawks because they've been so poor, but at least this way he'll get some more impact minutes and definitely prove his worth in case he wants to get traded away or something like that. But then, of course, Trae balled out as usual. I mean, he's just such a great player. He had 29 points, 4 rebounds, and 12 assists in this game. So he was doing it all for his team, trying to get them over the hump. They just fell short, but he was very efficient in this game. He shot the ball 8 for 12, and he was 4 for 5 from deep. But he did have 7 turnovers, so he's going to want to look at that for sure. That's probably what he's going to look at the most for this game, at least. He definitely could have shot more, but he definitely had one of the best moments of the game. If you haven't seen it yet, look it up. It was nasty. He had this moment in the game in the fourth quarter, I believe. He had this crazy through his legs dribble where he was, basically double teamed, threw it behind his back, through his legs, and he faked out Monte Morris and Michael Porter Jr. for just an easy lay-in. Porter thought he was going to do like a behind-the-back pass or something, but he threw it between his legs, and he just didn't see it happening, and it was just so smooth. And his acceleration, especially after the move was done, is why he had such an easy layup afterwards. But kids, don't try this at home. We want to focus on the fundamentals of basketballs, or maybe we do, I don't know, because players like him, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, they just show, freestyle basketball is a lot of fun to watch for sure. So learn the fundamentals and then start doing the tricks. But it really made me wonder if he's maybe the closest player to Steph Curry that we have in the league. In terms of his size, Curry was very small when he came into the league as well. But both of them have a lot of skill in terms of their ball handling skills. I mean, obviously, Curry has his pregame routine that shows off his ball handling skills. I think Trey, if he tried, Curry's whole routine, I think he could probably do a lot of it. And then Trey has that outside shot. He shoots from deep. Same thing as Curry, kind of models his game after him, I'm sure. So I think he's probably the closest thing to Steph Curry. Maybe Damian Lillard, but Damian Lillard's got a little bit more bulk on him than I think Steph ever really has. He does have the deep ball and the handles, but he's just a little more athletic than Curry is, I think. So I think Trey is definitely a good match for Curry. But either way, Trey has been hot, and so have the Bucks. Oh, wait. Nope, they finally lost the game. We'll tell you how after this.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how, the Nuggets have been doing really well as of late, and Jokic had himself a career night. And then we also talked about how Trae Young, even though, he got beat by the Nuggets that night and outdone by Jokic's career 47 points, he's been hot this year. And another team that's been hot has been the Milwaukee Bucks, but they finally lost a game. The Bucks have been the NBA's best team all season long. I mean, they've been virtually untouchable. And, a lot of it has to do with Giannis. We've talked about him a couple of times in this podcast. He's the front runner for the MVP for sure. He's just been so good this year in a follow-up season where he had got the honor of MVP last season. And he's leading this team to an untouchable record where they're almost winning every game by almost 14 points per game. In terms of the margin of victory. And, it's not like he has amazing talent surrounding him, but he just is such a force on both ends of the floor that, teams can't really find a way to stop him. He's second in points right now, so he's a high-volume scorer. I mean, he's only second right now because James Harden is having a historic year in terms of scoring the ball. He's sixth in rebounds. He's not necessarily always down low. He's not the center on the team. He's got Brook Lopez and Robin Lopez, but yet he still finds a way to get a lot of boards as a small forward. He's first in free throw attempts, which to me I think is kind of surprising, especially since James Harden is in the league and he's kind of a master of finding a way to get himself to the line. But I guess Giannis has kind of added this to his game, and the fact that, he's always so aggressive to the rim, he definitely finds ways to get to the charity stripe. He's first in 30-point and 10 rebound games, so he's very consistent in terms of getting double-doubles. He's first in that category as well. So for him to consistently get a large output of points as well as getting on the boards just speaks to how he's leading his team in so many different ways. And he's at a career high in assists as well with 5.5. A career high in field goal percentage at 56%. So he's really just doing it all. He's even bettering his MVP campaign last year. So it's kind of hard not to see this and want to put him in front of everybody else right now. He's just such a generational talent. You don't really see players like this come along so often. And the fact that he's also boosting up his three-point shot as well, he's starting to shoot it a little more, shoot it at a higher percentage as well, is just terrifying to think of. because if he really starts to develop that, it's going to be impossible to stop him. In half-court offense, he could stretch the floor. In transition, he's so fast. He takes 2 steps from three-point land, and he's underneath the rim already. He's got the mid-range shot. He's so aggressive to the rim. He could dunk on anybody. And he's a force on defense as well. So I don't know who's going to stop him in the next coming years, especially now that LeBron's in the back end of his career. Maybe Anthony Davis or Porzingis, but Giannis is just a freak of nature, which makes sense for them to call him the Greek Freak. But going into this game, the Bucks were 32-6 and were 22-0 against teams under 500. That's right. The Spurs are under 500, and they ended up beating the Bucks in this game. The Spurs, on the other hand, have been struggling this year. They're barely in 8th place right now in the Western Conference with a 15-20 record and a 4-10 record against teams over 500, which obviously the Bucks are. So if you were a betting man, anyone would have gone into this game thinking, oh, for sure, the Bucks are going to roll over the Spurs, and it's not even going to be a problem. Even though this Spurs team is led by the great Greg Popovich, they just haven't been able to catch any traction this year in terms of being consistent with their winning. And then going up against a team led by Giannis and just winning at a crazy rate this year, at a historic rate, no one would have expected that to happen. But the Bucks ended up losing this game 126-104. They lost by 22 points, so it wasn't even close. So it makes you think, once you see this grand total, you think, how could this have happened? Well, I'm going to tell you, simply put, the Bucks just weren't shooting the ball well at all. The Spurs, on the other hand, were. So one team was hot, one team was not. It just makes sense. In the first half, the Bucks had more shot attempts with 50 shots, but they shot a poor 38%, whereas the Spurs shot 44 attempts, 6 less than the Bucks, but they shot it at a clip of 52.3%. So when you're shooting the ball well and the other team is not, you're bound to be up more points. No matter how good your defense is, no matter how many high volume shots you're taking, doesn't matter. Not to mention that the 3-point shooting, the Spurs absolutely torched the Bucks in that aspect. In the first half alone, the Bucks shot 34.6% from 3-point land on 9 of 26 shooting, whereas the Spurs shot 60% on 12 of 20. So they had more made shots in less attempts than the Bucks. So they weren't trying to force their 3-point shots. I feel like the Bucks were really trying to search for their shot, especially Middleton, who was struggling early on in the game. And then, of course, because the Bucks were missing so many shots, the Spurs were totally out-rebounding them. The Bucks trailed 65-52 at the end of the half. They kind of started out better in the third quarter. They started gaining more traction, maybe looking to turn this game around. And the Spurs became a little more human in terms of their shot percentage. So their ability to torch the Bucks kind of went away in this third quarter. So you think that the game's about to turn around, Giannis about to take over, and this game's going to go the other direction. They dropped down to 38.5% field goal percentage and 37.5% from 3. This is the Spurs. So that's a lot more human and a lot more, easier to compete against if you're the Bucks. And the Bucks improved just a little bit as well. They shot 41.7% and then 44.4% from 3. So they kind of started finding the long ball, and that's going to help them in the long run. Just try and make this game a little closer. But then disaster struck. In similar fashion to the first half, the Spurs caught fire again. I have no idea how, but they shot 66.7% from the field and 57.1% from 3, with Rudy Gay scoring 10 and Lonnie Walker the fourth scoring 8. So they were going off in the fourth quarter. They pretty much couldn't even miss. Makes no sense. 66.7% of their shots they made. So every 2 shots out of 3 shots they made. That's a crazy rate at which they could be scoring. I don't know if it was just the Bucks not being able to play high-quality defense, or just the Spurs were having just one of those nights where they couldn't be stopped. And for the Bucks, it was rough. They couldn't take the lid off the basket. They couldn't get any traction in this game, and it doesn't help when you're shooting this bad, but the other team is shooting that well. Giannis, he did his thing. Of course, he scored 24 points. grabbed 12 boards and had 8 rebounds with 3 steals and a block. So he almost got a triple-double in this game where, his whole team was struggling. So he definitely tried to pick up the load for his team to lead them in this one. And, he did his part on the defensive end as well, but he just got no help from his teammates. Middleton added 15 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, which you would think is pretty good numbers, but he only shot 5 of 16 from the field and 1 from 7 from 3 when, that's kind of his specialty. He's kind of a catch and shoot player. So for him to shoot this poorly definitely hurt, the Bucks offense, kind of probably put him out of a rhythm as well. And some bright spots for the Bucks though were George Hill and DiVincenzo. They came off the bench. And then, George Hill put in 15 points, and then DiVincenzo had 16 points. And then Wesley Matthews as well had 12. But other than that, everyone else just completely struggled, including Bledsoe, who, has recently come back from injury, and they've been rolling since he's been back. But he only scored 2 points in this quarter, and then basically 2 of those points were from the charity stripe. Other than that, he missed all of his field goals. And then Robin Lopez was 1 for 6 and had only 2 points off the bench. So it was definitely rough, even for Korver, who was 0 for 4 with 1 point. But on the other end, there was a lot of contributions from the Spurs team. DeRozan kind of led the way. He scored 25 points, 3 rebounds, and had 7 assists. So he kind of became a facilitator a little bit in this game. Patty Mills, though, is definitely going to be a topic of discussion because he came off the bench and scored 21 points, maybe showing Pop that he should be getting high-volume minutes. But I feel like Pop really likes Patty Mills coming off the bench to lead that second unit, so it'll be interesting to see what Pop does with that. And then Aldridge and Rudy Gay both had 17 points, but Gay also added 8 rebounds as well, so he put up some big numbers. That's almost a double-double right there. DeJounte Murray had 13 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists, so like I said, all around just good performance for the Spurs versus the best team in the NBA. I mean, they still have the best record in the NBA and are 5 games up on the Celtics. So, the Bucks probably aren't worrying too much about this. It's still the regular season. They haven't lost a lot, and there's no need to panic. And, Giannis had this to say after the game, saying, quote, having a guy like Coach Bud to come out and say, oh, it's my fault. I could have done a better job. And having guys in the locker room say, it's one game. We didn't play well. It's our fault. We've got to do a better job. That's really big instead of us just making excuses, end quote. And I think this is, definitely the right sign for that championship mentality. Yeah, they drop one, but they know they could have been better. They're not making excuses for themselves and finding reasons why they lost this game. They're saying, look, we didn't play well. We're going to do better next time. We're going to dust ourselves off, and we're not going to worry about this one. We're going to do better next time. And so last podcast, we kind of talked about a few teams that were on a 5-game win streak. That included the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, that's over, but another team has kept that streak alive with another great win. The Utah Jazz have won 6 in a row, but their latest win had some controversy. So find out why, coming up next.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah Quiroz. We just talked about how the Milwaukee Bucks, who have been the best team in the NBA, have finally lost a game to a Spurs team that have been struggling, but were just red hot in this game. So the Bucks were shooting poorly, and they couldn't ever catch up. So they finally dropped a game, but they're not going to worry about it too much. They've had the best record in the NBA still have a 5-game cushion from the Boston Celtics. So their win streak ends at 5, but another team that had a 5-game win streak that we talked about last podcast has extended it. The Utah Jazz stay hot. They've kind of been on the rise as of late. They've been playing just much better basketball. They've won 11 of their last 12 games, which is, an impressive feat for them, especially since they kind of started out pretty poorly. I remember early on in the year, I was talking about how the Jazz have been underperforming. I think they could be one of the best teams in the Western Conference with the pieces that they have. A lot of this has to do with the schedule they've had as of late, though. It's been pretty easy, but, nevertheless, they got to win the game. And they've been doing that besides, the Clippers, besides the Clippers, this isn't a team that's under 500. They won 120-107. But other than that, they've mostly faced teams under 500 in this stretch of games where they've been winning a lot. Their record against these teams that are under 500 is 19-3. So at least they're consistent and they're not going down and playing to their competition. They're coming out and playing to their ability and, closing out games that they should be winning and should be closing out. So I think that is definitely a step in the right direction for the Utah Jazz. If you're going to be one of the best teams in the league, you got to take your chances against, the lower teams in the league. There's been times where, like I said earlier, the Wizards are beating teams of high caliber like the Heat, who definitely should not be losing to the Wizards because the Wizards have been struggling, haven't had a lot of games won this year, so definitely doesn't make sense for them to be losing. But during this time for the Utah Jazz, they've jumped all the way to 5th, and they're only 1 game back from 2nd place. So they've really been rolling, and it also shows just how close this Western Conference race is. 1 through 5 and 1 through 6, for that matter, are just extremely close in this race. If I'm looking at it correctly, I think the Dallas Mavericks are 2 games out of 2nd place. So 1 through 6 right now is only separated by just 2 games. But yeah, the Utah Jazz have been rolling. They're making a lot of traction in this Western Conference. Even though they lost their new acquired point guard in Mike Conley to a hamstring injury that he's been sidelined with for a while, it's almost seemed like they've played a little bit better without him, which is kind of interesting to see because Mike Conley is a great player that, had a lot of great years at the Grizzlies, but he's always been very injury prone. And so it's almost kind of expected for him to be out. And, he will be out for a couple more weeks. It's kind of indefinite right now. But, for them to be performing without one of their higher caliber players just speaks to their depth. And a lot of it has to do with the way Donovan Mitchell has been playing. He's been playing like an all-star. He really can become a great player in this league, and he's been proving in this recent stretch. He's averaging 25 points, 4.5 rebounds, 4.4 assists, which are all career highs for him, including his field goal percentage at 46.2. So he's, every single year he's been in the league, he's been pushing up his numbers. He's been steadily improving. I think he definitely can raise up those assist numbers, especially since he's handling the ball a lot of the times for the Jazz. And then also his defense as well. He's been getting a lot of praise for that. He could be, with his athleticism and his strength and his aggressiveness, I think he can be one of the best two-way guards in the league. So I think that should be a big challenge for him for sure. Another piece that's been kind of helping in this stretch is Bojan Bogdanovic. He's having a career year as well after, mightily improving from the 2018-2019 season. He's come in and he's put up 20.9 points per game, where his career average is only 13.9. He's also up in rebounds from 4.4 rebounds to 3.5. Reverse order, sorry. He had 4.4 rebounds this year. Career average is 3.5. So he's really been improving. He's a great piece that they added in the offseason. I think that was a great move for them for sure, especially since Bogdanovic was, starting to play so much better at the Pacers and just, playing with a lot of confidence as well in a, higher volume role. And so I think he's thriving here in Utah. And then when you have a center like Rudy Gobert, who's, an ex-defensive player of the year, and and just such a force down low. He's averaging a double-double. He's at his second best for point total at 14.5, but it's still so much better than his career average of 11.4. Plus, he's grabbing boards this year at just such a crazy rate. He's averaging 14.4 compared to his 10.8 average. So he's also just such a great rim protector. Like I said, he's a former Defensive Player of the Year. He has 1.8 blocks and 0.7 steals. So to have him down low, kind of filtering out some of the easy buckets that teams are used to getting, he's stopping those efforts and really contributing in terms of getting boards as well. But they're doing this all kind of without Joe Ingles, who's usually a big centerpiece for the Utah Jazz. I feel like Joe Ingles has kind of underperformed this year. He is, I guess, just a role player on this team, but his contribution has kind of decreased from his best year last year, where he was shooting 12.1 points per game and shooting 5.9 threes per game. He's now averaging only 10.5 points per game, and he's shooting 41.2% from three, but he only takes 5.2 threes a game. So I think he can increase his volume and definitely increase his impact for this team. He has the ability to do so, and when he gets hot, he's a player that can get hot like Steph Curry hot. So I think he definitely needs to increase his productivity for this team. In this particular game, though, he actually did. They were up against a hot Pelicans team that has had a lot of confidence lately. This is a Pelicans team that has bested the Nuggets, Pacers, and the Rockets in their last 6 games. So this game, they put the Jazz's win streak really in jeopardy. This was an extremely close contest. The Jazz, however, were just red hot from three-point land and shot 58.8% in the first half, especially Jordan Clarkson, who was 4 for 6 from three. And so that just continues to be a great move that they've made to bolster their depth and their roster. And so the Jazz took a 4-point lead into halftime. In the third, Brandon Ingram really started to find a groove. He scored 14 points to bring them level going into the fourth, where it was just a back-and-forth battle. The lead changed 18 times in this game, and the game was tied 11 times. So that just tells you how close it was. The game was tied with less than a minute and a half left to play. And then Donovan Mitchell hit the eventual game winner with 1:12 left, just from a great pull-up mid-range to put the Jazz up 2. But then the end of the game had some controversy to it. Brandon Ingram, who had a fantastic game, by the way, was driving to the basket, but before he got a full head of steam, apparently Alvin Gentry, Lonzo Ball, and J.J. Redick all tried to signal for a timeout. None of them got that timeout granted, and so they kind of just stopped trying when Ingram really started driving to the lane. And as the game clock was about to hit 0 and he went up for a layup, as the buzzer went off, there was also a whistle blown as well. So it kind of seemed like there was contact from Rudy Gobert. People thought there was going to be a foul here. The initial call was that there was no foul. The game was over. But the refs were going to look to see whether or not there was time left on the clock because there was a clock malfunction apparently. So a lot of weird stuff happening in this play. But after it all, they determined no foul. So the game was just over. And so it was kind of an interesting ending to the game where Ingram could have potentially gone to the line, could have potentially knocked down 2 free throws and pushed overtime. And you never know what's going to happen in overtime. So Ingram was not angry, though, about the call. In fact, he was very professional about it, saying that he felt, that there was contact, but the referee saw it differently, obviously, and that was the reality of it. Couldn't really do anything about it. Ingram had a fantastic game. He had 35 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists with a steal and a block. And Redick put up big numbers as well. He doesn't necessarily contribute like this all the time, but he did in this game. 23 points on 7 of 12 shooting, so just very efficient. Lonzo Ball has been playing extremely well lately. He followed that up with a 21-point, 8 rebound, and 7 assist night. He was 4 for 6 from 3, 8 for 14 from the field goal. So he was playing really well, almost got a triple-double. He's shooting the ball with just so much more confidence. So I feel like New Orleans is a really good situation for him. He's kind of thriving in this environment right now. They didn't have Drew Holiday due to illness, so I think that definitely would have bolstered them a little bit. But Utah ended up going up on top. Bogdanovich led the way with 35 points, but he had no other stats besides that, so he said, I'm just going to score a bunch of points and just let you guys do the rest. And other players picked up the slack for him. Ingles scored 22 points, had 2 rebounds and 6 assists. So I did say he's been underperforming. He's only been averaging 10 points per game this season, but he put up 22 in this game in a very close contest, so that was definitely good to see. Mitchell only had 19 points, 4 rebounds and 6 assists, and then Clarkson added 16 off the bench. So whether it could have gone to OT or not, Jazz walk away with the win and continue their win streak with the Knicks coming up next. So good chances it keeps going. The Knicks most recently played the Lakers, who have had some trade rumors circling around them. Find out who may be on their way out right after this. Stay with us.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how the Utah Jazz have stayed hot, increased their win streak to 6 games, but they had a little controversy in doing so. Late in the game, Brandon Ingram looked like maybe he was fouled. Refs eventually don't give a foul, and so the game ends. Jazz win by 2. It was super close, but they've been playing really well. But there have been some trade rumors circling the Lakers recently that we're going to switch to now. Kuz could potentially be on the chopping block. The Lakers are apparently listening to teams about a possible trade for him. I think this is a little unfair for Kuzma. I mean, I see what the Lakers are doing. They pretty much are already set up to be one of the top teams in the Western Conference, so they just want to bolster the team a little bit. Kuz hasn't really necessarily given them exactly what they've expected from him. But I think it's a little unfair to Kuz. You know, he was injured in the summer playing for Team USA, so he had that to deal with. And then he was injured in preseason, some of this season as well. So he really just couldn't get into a groove at all. You know, following a season where he played really well last year, people thought he was going to be this third piece in a LeBron, AD, and then Kuzma was going to be that third piece, especially coming off the bench. He was going to be that guy that kind of bolsters the second unit. But it doesn't seem like that's really working out. He's kind of not that guy that can lead a whole second unit by himself, at least not right now. He doesn't have the confidence for it. The consistency is kind of losing what he had last year, where, you know, he really thrived in being in a situation where he was the main guy. And now that he has to, you know, kind of take a back seat and just play a role, I don't think he's necessarily thriving in that position. It could be, you know, the injuries. I'm kind of making excuses for him, but nevertheless, the Lakers, you know, they kind of want to bolster their roster, so they're linked maybe with the Kings, who would give up their Bogdanovich. And, you know, Bogdanovich is a great player on the Sacramento Kings. He's a really reliable shooter. He's a better ball handler and passer than Kuzma for sure. And I think he would be a great complementary piece to a LeBron and AD-led team. Definitely a guy that can, you know, lead a second unit. He's a different type of player as Kuzma. Kuzma's kind of just a guy that's going to go out and get buckets, but Bogdanovich has a lot of versatility in his game. And he's a big piece for the Sacramento Kings. He's a reason why, you know, if they're competitive, he's probably, you know, a player that's going to impact the game. Buddy Hield's obviously their main guy. De'Aaron Fox leads the offense, but Bogdanovich always kind of gives that backing, that Iguodala effect type of impact on the game. He's also a great defender as well. So that would be a really good piece for the Lakers to acquire. They could possibly get Marcus Morris as well. I feel like that would be a really good option. And for that to happen, I think there'd probably be a 3-team trade needed, just to match salaries, because Kuzma has, this kind of weird contract where he doesn't cost a lot because, he hasn't, signed a guaranteed max contract yet. So his salary is really low. So in order for, the Lakers to find a trade that works, they have to find, a team that's willing to also pay some salary as well to match superstar money. So it'll definitely be tough for them to match salary. So they might do this Marcus Morris 3-team trade because he's been doing extremely well on a New York Knicks team that has had kind of an up and down season. They're kind of doing better as of late, but a lot of that has to do with him. Julius Randle definitely impacts as well, and RJ Barrett's kind of growing into the league and figuring out how to be a star in this league. But Marcus Morris is a veteran guy that could be a really good option for them to bring in. Iguodala as well has been linked with, both LA teams if he gets bought out by the Grizzlies. And so, obviously Iguodala was a key component to, the Warriors dynasty in their 3 championships. He never really impacted the game. I wouldn't say impacted the game because he did. He didn't get a high volume amount of points, but he takes great defensive matchups. He kind of, took on that responsibility of guarding Kawhi, guarding LeBron, and, guarding the best small forward that a team has to offer. Plus he's just clutch. He's not necessarily a good field goal shooter anymore, but for whatever reason, when it comes playoff time, he finds the basket and he plays really well. So that would be a perfect piece for the Lakers to add if he gets bought out. So not really sure. But nevertheless, Kuzma was a steal in the draft a couple years ago. So I feel like it would be tough for the Lakers to let him go. But, if they've got to do it, they got to do it. So Kuz may be out. But Dwight Howard actually has gotten a guaranteed contract from the Lakers. So he's not going anywhere. He's going to stay. His comeback has been epic. He, his first stint with the Lakers, he was not a likable guy at all. He had a huge ego, kind of fought with Kobe, didn't really mesh with Steve Nash. And Dwight Howard's still in that phase where he was thinking that, he wants to be the main guy and didn't really play for the team. So since then, he's fixed his ego. He's really learned his role and really accepted it as well. And he has such a great impact off the bench and a good veteran presence to help his younger players. And he's just a great teammate now. So he's got a lot of capabilities as well coming off the bench. He definitely deserves to stay long-term with the Lakers. He got 7.1 points per game on 73.8% shooting. He's got 6.8 rebounds per game and 1.4 blocks per game in just 19.5 minutes. So he definitely finds ways to impact when he gets on the floor. He's got just such a great rim presence. That's why he's got 1.4 blocks per game. And then, he's really great in pick and roll situations. He's just such a big body. You could throw it to him in the post and play off of him because he can shield out defenders low in the post. And then he's just such a great lob, threat as well. And then a great compliment to JaVale McGee coming off, Dwight Howard comes in off the bench for JaVale McGee, who's a great lob threat. And then Dwight Howard's a lob threat. So it works out really well for the Lakers. Dwight Howard had said this quote, "You got to be able to stand in the rain. That's what makes us humans. That's what makes us. It's hard to do. It's hard to go through hell and be like, okay, just smile it off. But you never know how close you are to a breakthrough if you just quit on yourself." End quote. I wanted to say this quote just because I think it's so true. He was a player that a lot of people thought was going to be out of the league. No one was really thinking about bringing him into their team just because of his history and how he was in the past. But he kind of took that, kind of reinvented himself, and, he wanted an opportunity, and he said he would make the most of it, and he's doing just that. He works really well with LeBron and Anthony Davis. And LeBron and Anthony Davis is a crazy tandem, by the way. And Shaq recently said that Shaq and Kobe would definitely beat AD and Bron on a 2-and-2. He had different words to say how they would beat him, but I won't necessarily quote that. But I think that would be a crazy matchup. Kobe and Shaq versus AD and Bron. I think I might have to give the advantage to AD and Bron just because they're not as selfish as players. AD probably would get bodied a little bit by Shaq just because he's such a dominant force down low, and it would be hard for AD to try and match that physicality, but I think AD definitely nudges him on athleticism and length a little bit, so AD could definitely use that to his advantage. And then Bron has just more physical abilities over Kobe. Kobe's obviously one of the best scorers in NBA history, and he just is such a great competitor, the way that his mind works, the way that he competes. And I think he would edge him on the mentality side for sure. But Bron is just, such a physical specimen that I don't think Kobe necessarily would be able to handle, even though Kobe's a great defender. LeBron is, in his prime versus Kobe in his prime. I might have to give it to LeBron. And so I think AD and Bron might win this 2-on-2. I think Shaq's wrong, but, everyone could think I'm wrong too, so who knows? And then Davis in this last game against the Knicks was getting all kinds of stats, except for points in this game against the Knicks. He kind of struggled shooting, 2 for 8, and only had 5 points, but he had 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and a block. So he was really impacting the game in different ways, not necessarily having to score in this one, because it is just the New York Knicks. But then he ended up getting injured in the third quarter. It was kind of a scary moment, too. He went up to block Julius Randle and kind of lost control of his body in the air and just landed awkwardly on his back and his tailbone, just slamming onto the floor. And then, he was face down, kind of hitting the floor as he was down. He's obviously in a lot of pain. He ended up leaving the game and didn't return. I mean, it's just such a terrible thing to see when you see superstars in such pain. You don't like to see it. It could honestly derail what the Lakers have been doing all year long if it's serious. But then he went back and got x-rays, and they came back negative, which was a great sign. He was just, saying how sore he was as of right now. So he'll get an MRI, and they'll see really if there's any serious injury. So no word as of yet. It's a wonder that KCP didn't get hurt as well because, at least a concussion, I would think, after Portis kind of wound up for a large block, but just totally missed and hit KCP across his head as, KCP drove to the basket. He hit him so hard he knocked his headband off. And then, the refs look at this, and it's obviously a flagrant 2. It resulted in him being ejected. It was just such a weird situation. But the Lakers won this one, no issues, even though they lost AD. Kind of a scary situation, but they won this game 117 to 87. Kind of showed the Clippers, you guys gave up this many points to this Knicks team. They only gave up 87 points in this game. So LeBron did work, of course. He scored 31 points, had 5 rebounds and 5 assists. Kuzma, through the noise, had 16 points and 6 rebounds, which is pretty good impact for him off the bench. And then KCP, he ended up being all right. He had 15 points in this game as well. So, the Lakers ended up winning this game. They're doing a good job. Playing without Anthony Davis for the rest of the game, closed out against a Knicks team that hasn't been playing that well. But like I said, Anthony Davis is injured, and there are other injuries happening around the league right now. Coming up next, I'll talk about just a couple of those injuries, and then I'll give you some predictions on some big games coming up in the next couple of days. Stay with us.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. So which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about some trade rumors circling around the Lakers right now. They might be looking to get rid of Kyle Kuzma. We're not sure yet, but they're definitely not trying to get rid of Dwight Howard. They've signed him for the rest of the year at least. And then in the recent game against the Knicks, they won soundly. Wasn't a big issue, but they could potentially have lost Anthony Davis for some time. He had a scary fall, landed on his back and his tailbone. We're not sure how injured he really is until he gets his MRI. So that was a scary situation for him. There's been some other injuries around the NBA as well. We're going to check in with the Sixers, who got back to winning ways against the Thunder team that has been playing really well. And they ended their 4-game win streak. They ended their 4-game skid, the Sixers. They were losing. They had 4 games lost in a row. But, them ending this 4-game skid kind of came at a price. Early on in the game, Joel Embiid was dealing with his finger. It was just bothering him, and he said he felt his finger snapping, and he kind of thought he fractured it. So they went to go check it out in the locker room, and he received x-rays, and everything seemed fine. But then he ended up returning with a minute and a half left in the third. Joel Embiid kind of went up for a block half-heartedly, and then that was it. His finger ended up pointing in a completely different direction. It was so gross to look at. I mean, it was just so unnatural the way it looked. And if you get kind of queasy looking at injuries, I wouldn't recommend looking this up. But yeah, it was pointed in the complete opposite direction than his other fingers. And so obviously that wasn't a good sign at all. A lot of people on his team were instantly, scared for him, as anyone would be. Initially you'd think it could be a really serious injury, but this guy is just so tough. He ended up returning at the start of the second quarter with his middle finger and his ring finger taped together. Crazy. He definitely had some discomfort throughout the rest of the game, but he said he wanted to be a leader. He said, quote, "I basically could only play with one hand. It was really bad. But in the midst of the losing streak, I just wanted to make sure I do everything possible to get us a win. And I was glad to get us a win. The consequences, you assume them later, but as the leader, I wanted to go out and show your teammates that you want to win and you're going to do whatever possible to do so." End quote. I think this is huge for Embiid. I mean, in a team where, they kind of have a young core still, they've been struggling as of late, a lot of noise around them, whether or not they can be a legit team, a legit competitor for a championship, and, talks about, locker room issues as well. And here he is trying to be a leader. He just messed up his fingers so bad, but he still comes back out, fights through it, and they held off a Thunder team that had won 5 straight. And all 5 starters and Burke off the bench were in double-figure scoring. It was great to see. Simmons almost got a triple-double. He put up some big numbers, 17 points, 15 rebounds, and 8 assists, which was really good to see for Ben Simmons. He needs to be more consistent like that. Joel Embiid actually almost got a triple-double as well, which is crazy to think with a messed up finger. But he had 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists. So the Sixers get back to winning ways. Joel Embiid looks like he won't be able to play against the Celtics, so that'll be a tough loss for them. And another tough loss is for the Detroit Pistons. Blake Griffin is injured as well. He's had a knee injury, but he just recently had surgery on it. They want to make sure they don't rush him back. They know that, there's just no need to rush him, especially in a season where they've been playing so poorly. They kind of know the direction they're going in right now in terms of their organization. And just know that this year they kind of need to take a step back and know that they can't push for playoffs this year. I mean, Blake's kind of been a warrior for them. He's been, pushing them and elevating them to a higher level. He took them to, the playoffs, but, his body has just given up on him. He can't really do it. He's on a career low this year with 15.5 points per game and 4.7 rebounds per game in just 18 games this season. So, and then Griffin, they got him a couple years ago, and it just hasn't been, the story they necessarily wanted to see, because Griffin's been injured a lot of the time. He has had a lot of injuries in his career. He actually had surgery on this same knee back in April. So honestly, this could be the end of his season. They don't know. They don't have any timetables yet. But it really raises the question if he'll ever be the same. Knee injuries are kind of tough to see, and there's been talks that, he's had bone-on-bone contact in there. So if that's the case, his explosiveness, the way that he's played the game before, just so aggressive and athletic. I don't know if he'll ever have that again. Hit the same jump, it won't be the same. And he won't be this physical force either. So I think he's going to have to change up his game if he comes back. So I think it's going to be tough for him to kind of change his style and stop being so injury prone, because, injuries have plagued his career, his whole career. So it's been tough to see for him for sure. But those are the injury updates. We're going to do a couple predictions before ending the show, because there are some big matchups coming up. I kind of foreshadowed it a little bit ago. Celtics versus 76ers on Thursday. This is going to be a big matchup, a big Eastern Conference matchup. The Celtics are in second place right now and just absolutely rolling. Even though they don't have Kemba Walker, their kind of leading guy, their point guard, they are still 8-2 in their last 10. They did just lose a game, but they're not too worried about that. Sixers are getting back on track, just won. But they don't have Joel Embiid. So because of the fact that they don't have Embiid, I think the Celtics are going to take this game. They just have way more depth than the Sixers have. And without Joel Embiid, the Sixers can't put up a lot of points. I feel like Embiid takes a lot of that weight. Tobias Harris can get some points. Josh Richardson can get some points. I don't think Simmons can necessarily have a high volume game against the Celtics. So they don't have enough high volume players to win this game. The Celtics do, however. They have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Gordon Hayward, if he's back into playing his best. I think Enes Kanter is going to have a big game in this one, just because, who's he going to go up against down low? Al Horford. So I think the 76ers are going to struggle in this game without Embiid. So I don't think they're going to win. I think Celtics are going to take this one. Another big matchup is the Lakers versus the Mavericks on Friday. So this game has a lot of question marks. We don't know how serious Anthony Davis's injury is, whether or not he's going to be too sore to even compete in this one. The Mavs, I'm not sure if they're going to have Porzingis back. They don't have a scheduled date for him yet, but so I'm going to give a couple scenarios. If both AD and Porzingis play, the Lakers are going to win. There's no question about it. It's almost impossible to stop that much firepower, even though Luka Doncic is playing as well as he is this year. But I think Porzingis' ability to bounce back from injury won't be as impactful as Anthony Davis's, especially with a LeBron-led team. So I think in that case, the Lakers will win. If AD doesn't play, but Porzingis does, then the Mavericks will get the leg up. I think they'll win. Luka will lead his team over a LeBron-led team because LeBron just won't have enough assets. He'll have some good impacts from KCP. Maybe Kuzma will show out and show up, but I don't necessarily see that happening. Dwight Howard will make an impact for sure, as well as JaVale, because they don't have a lot going on down low for the Mavericks besides Porzingis or Powell, so I don't know how that's going to shake out for them. If both players don't play, I think I'm going to give this to the Mavericks, just because I don't see anyone on the Lakers stopping Luka. I really don't. I think, there's ways to stop LeBron, but I don't think there's ways to stop Luka. He's just too good. So 2 out of the 3 scenarios I just gave you, I think the Mavericks going to win this game. It's going to be a good one, though. And the last contest I'm going to talk about is the Pelicans and Celtics, and I'm actually going to take probably the road less traveled by in this one. I'm going to give it to the Pelicans. The Pelicans are playing extremely well as of late. Like I said, the Celtics don't have Kemba Walker, so that's kind of tough for them. He's the guy that leads their offense. Their top point getter, other than Jaylen Brown, who's in second, but not that close for points per game. I think the Pelicans have enough firepower to do this. If Lonzo Ball continues playing the way he's been playing, he'll get over 20 points per game. He'll add some boards, and he might get double digits in assists as well. He might get a double-double in this one. And then they also have Brandon Ingram, who, like I've said previously, he's one of the most improved players in the league this year. He's been on a tear as of late, and coming off a game where they kind of got cheated against the Jazz, they're going to be looking for blood. They're going to play really well. Maybe they might get Drew Holiday back from sickness, so he'll kind of lead the offense. But I just really think that the Pelicans have been playing really well recently. They've been beating great teams, and I think they can do it again here against the Celtics. So that's my last prediction. Their Pelicans are going to beat the Celtics, and so we're going to see how I did in my next podcast. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm Isiah Quiroz. Thank you, and see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.